As I mentioned earlier, today's presentation is on the 2050 Freight Industry Level Forecast Update. We're going to hold the questions until the end. I will monitor the chat box, so please enter any questions you have along the way into the chat, and we will take all the questions at the end. So our first speaker is Chris Lamb, a principal of Cambridge Systematics and the consultant project manager for the freight forecast. He has 19 years of experience in metropolitan planning and regional and state freight planning, policy and data analytics. Chris has worked with NJTPA to develop, update, and enhance its freight data and analysis tools over the course of 3 previous freight forecasting studies dating back to 2010. Jack Glodek will follow Chris. Jack is an associate at Cambridge Systematics and the deputy project manager on this effort. He has 8 years of experience in the transportation industry as a roadway and traffic engineer and a freight planner, while he's worked on numerous statewide and regional freight plans and efforts. This is his first time working with NJTPA on the Freight Industry Level Forecast Update. So I'll turn it over to Chris to get us started.
Hey Jacob, this is Jack. I'm not sure Chris is here actually. He had some emergency or last minute, I guess, surgery this morning, and I'm not sure if he's doing the after effects, but I'll give the presentation, I guess, in his stead.
Okay, yeah.
Unless he jumps on. Someone
yell at me. Sounds good. Thanks, Jack.
Of course. All right. Well, nice to meet everyone. I'm Jack Glodek, the second name on the screen there. I've been working on this project for just about a year now. It's been tons of fun. Jacob's been a great guy to work with, and we're excited to present it to you. So if we jump to the next slide. So what we're going to cover today, quick study overview, and then we're going to talk about some of the data that went into this, specifically our commodity flow data. Then we're going to go into kind of our biggest addition to this round of this project, the e-commerce trip table development and e-commerce modeling. And we're going to talk about one of the parts that we did of this, the business establishment database. That's a product that we prepared for Jacob and NJTPA that can be shared with all the subregions in NJTPA. We're going to finish with then our the tool that we created, which is something in R Shiny, and then a way to interact with the data in our public data dashboards. So if we go to the next slide, start with the study overview. So as Jacob mentioned, this is the 4th time that this project's been done. It's done roughly every 5 years. So right now in 2025, each time we do this project, we add in new wrinkles, new scenarios, new data sources, new products and everything. So the biggest things that we added this time were the latest pieces of data that we used previously, such as data from the Freight Analysis Framework and from Moody's, but we updated it to the latest data. We also have disaggregated that data down to all subregions. I believe previously it was only to the counties, but now we have Jersey City and Newark in as well. We've made, user interface updates to all of our products. And then, of course, the big one is we've kind of incorporated more holistically e-commerce into this process, both because it's an important part of the freight logistics chain, and also because, it's the growth that we've seen in e-commerce in recent years is outstanding, and it's good to get a handle on what's going on with it. We've also added new scenarios into this tool. We'll talk about all these things later, and then we've produced some nice looking dashboards that people can We go to the next slide. So more specifically, what have we done this time? So in previous years, I believe this tool, we kind of had forecasts that went to freight forecasts that went to 2050. We've extended that to 2055 this time, but we still present stuff kind of at the 2050 level, since that's kind of the long-term horizon year for a lot of the work that NJTPA does. And as I mentioned, we've developed new scenarios. What are the key things that go into this tool? So the freight analysis framework, which is a data source from the US government, um, that's kind of our main piece of data that goes into this. And then we disaggregate that and perform all kinds of interesting manipulations of that. And then we've enhanced that, as I said, with our e-commerce or direct-to-consumer data. And that's kind of the big new thing this year. And then one of the outputs, we've wrapped everything up that we've done into one nice tool. That's FFT. That's what we refer to when we say that. And then we have our final data dashboards, which are going to be online and publicly available, so anyone can use them, including all of the subregions and stakeholders of NJTPA. If we go to the next slide, this is kind of an overview of the entire study. I'm not going to read every single word on the screen here, but in general, what we did starting maybe like a year and a half ago or almost 2 years ago, we reviewed all of the new data that we could incorporate into this new study and prepared methodology updates that we were going to do, validated that with Jacob and the rest of NJTPA. And we ended up acquiring a lot of that data. As I mentioned, some of the data, freight analysis framework or FAF, that was kind of the main one. And we also acquired a lot of data to manipulate that. We acquired data from Moody's, which is an economic provider. We acquired data from Nielsen IQ, which gave us a lot of information on e-commerce data and packages. Acquired truck GPS data from a service called Locus, and business establishment data, mainly from a service called I forget what it's called, but we'll get there. Sorry.
CoStar.
And
CoStar.
CoStar, thank you. I was going to say carload, but that's not it. And the first kind of process that we did here, we disaggregated our FAF data down to the sub-regional level, so mainly the counties, but then also with cutouts for Newark and Jersey City, since FAF data doesn't come at that level, and we'll explain more of that later. Then we estimated our e-commerce and direct-to-consumer flows using the Nielsen IQ data and Locus data, and that ended up with a model that we came up with for e-commerce that was able to get us an origin destination trip table for e-commerce that we were then able to do all kinds of interesting things with. And we kind of smushed all those things together again into our freight forecasting tool, improved the user interface and everything like that. And then we added to that all kinds of what if scenarios and different adjustments that you can make. So what if scenario is something like if you wanted to see what would happen if the port of New York and New Jersey suddenly had a huge growth spurt, or if there was increased in migration into the region or something like that, how would that affect freight flows and how would that affect where freight moves throughout the region? Throughout all this, we conducted outreach with key industry stakeholders and the subregions that we were able to get a hold of, which was that was a good way to validate a lot of the results that we were seeing, and they provided a lot of good feedback throughout the process. And then finally, at the end, we've exported all our results, and then we've summarized them both in a final report and in our online dashboards that we'll show off throughout the presentation here. So if we get into the first part of this, the commodity flows. So as I've been mentioning, our main source of data is the Freight Analysis Framework, or FAF, which again comes from the US government. And it gives us information on freight flows from businesses to businesses. So for example, if there's a quarry in Pennsylvania and it ships sand to the NJTPA region by train, it'll tell us how much it does that, how the tonnage and the value of what it does. But one of the problems with this is that it's not at a discrete enough level in terms of geography that we can meaningfully analyze it kind of within the NJTPA region. So this map on the right, you can kind of see the different zones that this data comes in. You can see NJTPA is almost completely the kind of the light purple zone in the middle there. Some of the other zones are like the Philadelphia region, the Lehigh Valley region, southern New York there, southern New Jersey. And what we needed to do to kind of counteract that was disaggregate the FAF data into all the subregions within New Jersey. And we also removed, I think that's Mercer County. That's not part of NJTPA as well. We did this using mainly employment data in each of the counties and in the zip codes for the couple cities that we need to disaggregate it to. And if we go to the next slide, data from FAF also comes not only in those zones that we saw in the previous slide, but it also comes through ports. So for example, the Port of New York, New Jersey side, that spreads across multiple counties and cities within our area. So we need to figure out how to split that up kind of among the different counties that it's in and among the different cities that it's in. So we had to make a few assumptions, based on land area, based on where we know specific types of terminals are and stuff like that to split that up as well. And if we go to our next slide. So another thing that we did was the data from FAF comes at kind of an individual commodity level. So that's these light blue columns here. So you might have something like building stone or gravel or base metals or something reported in the data. And then we aggregated that up into commodity bundles, which are a little bit easier to deal with and a little bit easier to understand, such as aggregates for what I just mentioned. We've got like pharmaceuticals, pharmaceutical drugs. We've got coal, petroleum, gasoline, all in our other energy products bundle, stuff like that. And the one I want to point out to you that's probably, again, the most interesting one in this go around of the study is bundle one, which is durable consumer products and direct to consumer. So this includes things from FAF like furniture, miscellaneous manufacturing products, mixed freight, but then it also includes what came from outside FAF, which are our direct to consumer or e-commerce flows. And throughout this process, we have direct to consumer incorporated into this first bundle, but we also have it so you can pull it out and look at it specifically outside of bundle one as well. So speaking of e-commerce, if we jump to the next slide. So again, this was, the big topic of this update of the study was estimating how e-commerce moves throughout the region. So e-commerce rate is not included in the freight analysis framework because freight analysis framework goes from business to business. So like I was saying before, something like a quarry to a production or industrial facility to a warehouse or something like that. That's the type of flows that it has in there. And it does not have business to consumer flows. So if you order something on Amazon, on Amazon Prime or whatever, that'll go from a warehouse or a distribution center directly to your house. And that's kind of a different type of freight movement, right? Business to business freight movements, those are going to travel mainly on interstates the entire way, until they get directly to their destination, and they might go on some arterials and collectors and stuff like that. But business to consumer or direct to consumer or e-commerce flows, those all travel directly to your house, and they're going to travel on local neighborhoods and everything like that. So it's important to understand those, especially as it's grown a lot in the most recent years. And we took a first stab at kind of estimating these sorts of flows in the previous version of this entire project 5 years ago. But it was a little simplistic, and we've got a lot better data this time, and we feel like we've improved the model a lot and gotten much better results. So if you go to the next slide, yep, this is what we did last time. We got package estimates and package data from a company called Rakuten, and then we figured out where warehouses and distribution facilities for companies like Amazon, FedEx, UPS, USPS, all those sorts of things were. And then we were able to try to model delivery tours from those facilities, to houses. And we tried to come up with then an origin destination matrix specifically for e-commerce. But now in this iteration of the study, on the next slide, we've got a lot more data. So previously we had Rakuten data. Now the company has changed names and it's called Nielsen IQ. So we're getting that data from the same source. We also have our facility data as well, same as last time. But now we also have information on package scan history. So for example, when you order something off Amazon or UPS or whatever, you can track that package online and you can see that it's scanned into a warehouse, and then it's scanned out of the warehouse and onto a truck, and then it's scanned into an additional warehouse, and you can kind of track the way it moves throughout the country. And we got a sample of those scans for packages that went into NJTPA, and that helped us figure out, if a package is being delivered in general to this zip code, it's coming from this distribution center. And then you can model kind of the roads between the two and figure out exactly where that package is going. And we've also been able to use data from Locus, which is a big data platform that in general can get truck flows from census tract to census tract. And we were able to use that real data to validate our e-commerce model and make sure we were producing results that were consistent with the real world. I'm not going to get into everything in the process there, but the output was an improved origin and destination matrix for e-commerce delivery trips that we think much better reflects the accurate real world data that we were able to get as well. So if we go to the next slide, these are just some highlights that we found from our e-commerce data and study. So the last time that we did this project, we got data from 2018, and now we have data from 2023, real data, and packages delivered to NJTPA increased 237% in those 5 years. So 237%, that's not doubling, but that's more than tripling the number of packages just in 5 years. So that gives you the sort of sense of scale on how much bigger an area of study this has become in the last 5 years. And nationally, we're also seeing a huge growth, more than triple, but NJTPA is growing just a little bit faster than kind of the rest of the country on average. And then we've got some of the major zip codes that had the most packages delivered here. Not going to go into every single one. I'm sure they're not surprising to a lot of people. But overall, in 2023, there were over 200 million packages that were delivered just into NJTPA. And you can see a little bit of the distribution of them in the map on the right. But that's part of the dashboard that we'll get to at the end as well. If we go to the next slide, these are some more highlights from the e-commerce data that we have. You can see the carrier share on the left. So Amazon, almost 70% of the packages delivered into the NJTPA region are from Amazon. Second highest is United States Postal Service. They're in tan color, followed by FedEx and UPS, each with 6, 7, 8% there. And then there's a few other package delivery services, but those are kind of the big main four, especially dominated by Amazon, of course. And then the graph on the right, part of what we did was forecast the real data from 2023 into future years based on a bunch of different factors. And then this is kind of what we're expecting this increase to look like over the next 25 years. So between 2025 and 2050, we're expecting an additional 150% increase from where we are now. So that's more than doubling another double from where we were now to where we're going to be in our long-term horizon year in 2050. So this issue isn't going to go away, and it's something that is definitely good to get a handle on the earlier we can. And then if we go to the next slide here, this is just a small animation that we did. Using that scan data that I mentioned, we can somewhat pinpoint where that data, where that scan happened. I think we have it by zip code. So if I think Jacob's controlling, if we kind of step through the map slowly going into
right here.
It's right there.
It's great.
Got a lot of time.
someone have their okay, yeah, sorry. As we step through this map, this goes backwards in time. So the first map was where packages are delivered. Now you can see where like the second to last scan was. So this is probably like a distribution center. And as you go into the third to last scan, fourth, fifth to last scan, you can see kind of the hot spots across the map slowly propagating throughout the entire Northeast. And, this map is just centered on the Northeast and the Mid-Atlantic region, but, we are able to track these packages all the way from, the NJTPA region to other parts of the country. Like some packages come in through Texas, some come in through like the Port of Los Angeles, Long Beach, and then some of them even come right from places internationally, like China or something like that. So really cool data that we were able to use. And then, as I mentioned, we were able to use data from a provider called Locus, which again is real world big data to validate our model. So one of the things that we modeled was how far these, we're calling them tours, how far these tours are and how long they take these delivery trucks to make. And then on the right, you can see a comparison. Orange is our model that we came up with, and then blue is the real data from Locus. So you can see we've tried to make it so our model follows along these distributions as accurately as we can. And as we went through the process, the first time that we made this graph, it didn't look as nice as it does right now. So then we had to adjust our assumptions and kind of continually adjust different variables and stuff like that as we went through and able to get it to line up like this. And then if we go to the next slide, yep. You don't need to read every single word in the graphic on the right, but this just shows you some of the top distribution facilities in the region, for each of our 4 major carriers. So you can see the top one, the Amazon facility in Avenel, over 400 trucks come from that facility. We're projecting each day to make deliveries. And as you can see, it goes down. There's one in Tinton Falls, over 300 trucks. Others have, 100, 200 trucks. So it gives you a little bit of an idea of where light e-commerce delivery trucks may be coming from. And then we go to the next slide. This is a map of, so part of the thing that we output from our e-commerce model is an origin destination matrix for e-commerce that then you can input into the New Jersey transportation demand model, which is called the NJRTME. And then you can see, on a link level where e-commerce trucks are moving. So this is existing, and then if you go to the next slide, that's future. And in general, a lot of these trips, they start from an e-commerce facility, and then they'll get on a big highway like an interstate or something like that until they reach the neighborhood that they're going to. And they'll get off the highway, and then they'll kind of make a big loop around a couple neighborhoods, however many packages they have. And they'll get back on the highway and then go back to their distribution center. So most of these tours, as we're calling them, kind of look like big lollipops or something like that. That's the way I always thought of it. Yeah. So yeah, e-commerce huge addition to the study, tons of nice data, really cool to model. And then as hinted on the next slide, another part of this, completely separate from e-commerce, was business establishments. So this is, we took data from a bunch of different sources, CoStar data, we got data from Infogroup, Lightcast, Mergent Intellect, and maybe some others that I forgot to list on the screen. Combined all that data together, and then we came up with a map of where freight generating businesses are located throughout the region. And as we went through a lot of our stakeholder outreach and our feedback processes, we got input from subregions and were able to then edit the data that we all pulled together and correct it for some of the localized knowledge that everyone had. So, you know, if they knew a big industrial facility was opening up or closing, we could then reflect that on this map. And in general, the purpose of this was to create a big database that NJTPA and all of its stakeholders can then use for whatever sort of project or exercise that they wanted to use. So if we go to the next slide, this is kind of a clean map of our final database. We've colored all of the different points by whether they fall into 3 different categories of facility. So a production facility, that's in blue. That'd be something like a quarry or a building that makes furniture or something like that. Logistics, those are going to be your like warehouses and kind of intermediate steps along the logistics chain. And then sales facilities are in gray. So that's like malls or shops or wherever people actually buy these. And then in this map, the circles are sized. So bigger circles are facilities that have more square footage and stuff like that. And this is available, again, I keep mentioning it, on our dashboards. We'll get to that to the end. So you don't need to squint your eyes and zoom into this map. You'll be able to see a better version of it at the end. So next, we're going to get into our freight forecasting tool that we made. So this is the one tool that kind of combines everything together and enables Jacob and NJTPA to interact with the data and play with it and test assumptions and change assumptions and stuff like that. This was built in a piece of software called R Shiny, which is, if you're familiar with the R coding language, it's just kind of an add-on that enables you to develop applications. And again, it brings in everything that we've been discussing so far, enables you to turn on and off different what-if scenarios, and then view the outputs in a quick manner at the end. And then the big thing that we added to this year was in previous years, you had to do a little bit of work outside of the tool. Part of the FAF disaggregation process, you would do that outside of the tool and then import it in, but we've actually moved that into the tool. So it's even easier to work with in theory and more automatic. If we go to the next slide, I've mentioned it a few times, but we have these what if scenarios in here. So if you wanted to, well, we have a list here on the left. These are what if scenarios we had in the previous versions of the tool. I think there are 10 there. We adjusted these a little bit, kept them mostly the same, but changed assumptions for some of them. And then we've added 7 new what if scenarios that you see there on the right. So if you wanted to test, for example, what would happen if no fossil fuels were used in the United States anymore, you know, drop all those commodities to zero, increase the commodities, you know, associated with renewable energy and everything like that. How does that affect where freight moves throughout the region? How does it affect what modes freight moves on, stuff like that. And then, you know, we've got 6 other versions of those types of things. But yeah, this is a key way to kind of test the resiliency of the freight network, or at least see how the freight network might respond to some of these changes. If we jump to the next slide, So in general, this tool that we made, it goes through this 4-step process. There's a lot of other steps, but this is just the 4 main ones. It reads in the freight analysis framework, disaggregates it, and then it projects the freight analysis framework into the future using our kind of customized economic forecasts from Moody's and some other data. And it applies any of the what if scenarios that you've kind of turned on. And then it produces a bunch of results, including a trip table that can then go back into the NJTPA transportation demand model. And then we have a couple slides here just of pictures of what parts of the tool look like. I don't think many people on the call will ever be running it, but this just gives you some idea of kind of the sort of customization that you could put in here. You can change your forecast year. You can change your estimated economic growth scenario. So if you think the economy is going to grow a lot, you put in a high economic growth scenario. If you don't think it's going to grow a lot, you can put in a low one. There's other assumptions that you can change in here, like this Union County fuel adjustment. If you go to the next slide, other assumptions that we've had, e-commerce, we've assumed an average of 2 pounds per package and about $160 per delivery on average. You can change those. If you go to the next slide, this is what part of the what if areas of the tool look like. So if you, for example, wanted to turn on the changes to in-migration or urbanization what if scenario, you'd click on there at the bottom, and then you'd input how much additional growth you'd want to see there in the box. So tons of customization that you can get out of these what if scenarios as you play with them. And then our next slide, this is just a map of what some of the outputs look like. The darker colors are more tonnage. And then if you go to the next slide, there's a lot of pop-ups that come up, if you click on various areas that tell you more specifically tonnage and value in certain areas. And we've broken out e-commerce specifically here. The next slide shows some of the graphs that come out of this. So you can see the graph in the top right that shows how freight's going to change, in general over the next 20 to 25 years. It compares it between the what if scenarios and kind of the baseline forecasts. So you can see how the what if scenarios change that baseline forecast. You can see how they'll change flow directions and types at the bottom. If we go to the next slide, this is all the different commodities that come out. You can see how those will change. You can see how the modes that freight change. And I think we've got one more for after this slide on these are how the freight will change by subregion. And you can compare the baseline forecast and the what if scenarios. And then we've got one more slide here. As we've said, a key output of this tool is the output that goes into then the transportation demand model. So you can play with a few adjustments kind of related to that process. You can turn that process off, make the tool run faster, or if you want to turn it on, then you'd have that information to then run the entire transportation demand model. And then kind of the last thing that we wanted to talk about with this, these are our online data dashboards. So these were created in a product on ArcGIS Online, if anyone's familiar with that. And these are the way for the public and for key stakeholders to interact with the outputs, at least the baseline outputs of this tool, in a much nicer way than kind of some of the graphs that we've shown on the previous screens and everything like that. In previous iterations of the study, we produced 5 to 10 page PDF profiles or reports, I guess you could say, one for each subregion and one for each commodity bundle. And these online dashboards are meant to replace that and give you a much more interactive way to deal with things, to interact with things, and hopefully it inspires people to interact with freight a little bit more than a PDF would. So I'm gonna, I think, take control of the screen and show that off for the last 5 or 10 minutes. All right, somebody let me know if they can see my screen, please.
Yes.
Thank you. Okay. All right. So this is kind of our landing page, and we've got 2 types of profiles in here. As I mentioned, we've kind of got our regional or sub-regional profiles, and we've got our commodity profiles. So I'll start in the regional profiles. In general, there's this box on the top left where you can choose which area you want to look at. So if you wanted to look at all of NJTPA, click that. If you wanted to look at Bergen County specifically, you click on Bergen, and then everything would filter. Takes a little bit of extra time because I'm sharing my screen, but it's faster when you're not doing that. And it would zoom in, and then it would turn off all the other areas. There you go. And all these numbers would change and everything like that. You can play with the economic scenario, as I kind of mentioned. So if you think the economy is going to grow a lot, you can select high. If you think it's going to grow a little bit, you can select low, or some kind of medium amount. You can select base, and that'll change all the numbers that display. And then when all of NJTPA is selected here, you can turn on or off through flows. So through flows are freight flows that start and end outside of NJTPA's region. So if something is being shipped from like Boston to Philadelphia and it goes down I-95 or something like that, that would be a through flow. It doesn't end or start in NJTPA, but it goes through. So when we're looking at the entire region, you can turn that on and get that data kind of incorporated. But it pretty much somewhere between doubles and triples the amount of freight throughout the region. So we've had that, so you can turn it off if you just want to look at NJTPA specifically. And then all these sub-menus kind of on the bottom left, those are all the different ways you can visualize all this data. So I'll turn it back to Bergen County. So if you're Bergen County and you wanted to see the base forecast scenario, what's freight going to kind of look like for us? You know, in 2025, there's around 64 million tons of freight, and that's projected to grow almost 23% to 79 million in 2050. And you can see in Bergen County, most of the freight stays within NJTPA, but around a third of it comes in from external places, and around 20% comes from Bergen County and then goes outside of the NJTPA region. Other graphs in here, we've got these by commodity bundles. So in Bergen County, natural gas is the commodity with the most tonnage being moved throughout. You can see it's mostly either being imported into the county or it stays within NJTPA, and Bergen only exports a little bit of natural gas compared to something like aggregates. They export almost none, and they move most of it around throughout NJTPA. We've got a graph by mode, so you can see most of the regions have truck and pipeline as the top 2 modes. We've got a graph of trading partners. So in Bergen County, you can see Canada as the top trading partner, followed by Africa, Connecticut, California, both for 2025 and 2050. We've got this submenu on e-commerce. So in Bergen County, this is that map we were showing you in the presentation, but only for Bergen County. You can click on these zip codes and you can see, okay, in 2023, 1.5 million packages were delivered to this zip code, and 1.1 out of 1.5 were from Amazon and everything like that, which is almost 3/4 of the amount. And all other kinds of data kind of by zip code here. And then you can see in Bergen County, we've got this graph on the right, e-commerce forecasts, they're going to grow from around 50 million packages in 2025 to 127 million in 2050, which is a growth of 155%. You can switch this up so you can look at different carriers if you wanted. The previous view was all carriers. You can switch to Amazon, FedEx, USPS, whatever you'd like, and you can keep clicking on things and seeing different pop-ups. You can look at kind of a zoomed in version of highway utilization here. So you can see roughly how many trips there are on different roads throughout your subregion or county. This gives you the 2050 view, and then you can switch to 2025 by clicking this button on the bottom right here. So you can see how it kind of grows between the two years. Not too much growth, but you can see this road in the middle kind of jumps out as growth. You can also look at some of the demographics associated with freight movement. So this one right here is median household income. That especially correlates a lot with e-commerce deliveries and stuff like that. And you can also look at population change to see where, in the future, there might be more deliveries in areas where the population increases versus decreases, stuff like that. You can also look at employment data, both historical and future employment data, freight-related employment data. This gives you all the employment, but you can turn these off and look at specifically like wholesale trade. This is purple. You can see that's kind of peaked in the late 80s, and then it's projected to kind of decrease in general over the next bunch of years. Utilities stayed somewhat consistent until around now. Transportation and warehousing increased a lot in the last 10 to 15 years. And then we've got freight facilities kind of on this last tab, which is one of the last things I talked about in the presentation, where you can kind of see in different parts of the county where your production, logistics, and sales facilities are. And you can filter by those types kind of down here on the right here. And then wherever you are in this, if you click the information button here in the top right, this jumps to this submenu about profiles, and it gives you a lot of the background information, a little bit about what this is, where the data comes from, some disclaimers, and what some of the words and definitions are in here. And then if you ever wanted to take a picture of one of the graphs or maps or anything, you have to use the Windows snipping tool or whatever the Mac equivalent is. And then I'm not going to go through everything in the commodity profiles, but they're very similar. The main difference is instead of choosing a region here in the top left, you choose a commodity. So chemicals, for example, you can see chemicals are forecasted to grow 57% over the next 25 years versus something like agriculture is projected to decrease a little bit. And then the rest of the kind of these are the same sort of thing as the regional profiles, but just for a specific commodity. So yeah, I just talked for a long time. So I'm going to stop sharing my screen. And then are we doing questions now, Jacob, or later?
We're gonna do well, first of all, can you guys see my screen?
Not yet.
Not yet. Yep.
All right. That was a very smooth transition. So yeah, we're gonna do questions now, but I did and I don't want to put Chris on the spot necessarily, but I did see that Chris joined in. And I guess first of all, Jack, thank you for jumping in last minute and going through it. I think you did a really good job with all of the materials. And I just wanted to give, I guess, Chris an opportunity if he has anything to that he wanted to maybe add as part of the presentation. And if not, then we can just go right into the questions.
Yeah, let's go right into the questions. Jack, thank you from me for stepping in last minute. Appreciate it.
Yeah, hope your
All right.
surgery went well.
Yes, hope everything's good, Chris. Yeah, so I don't see many questions in the chat other than one from Kamal. Will the dashboard be available? And Melissa answered that yes. Eventually, we're gonna basically swap out what we have on the website now in the Freight Activity Locator with all this new material, and it would be publicly available to all. And I anticipate that to happen in the next couple of weeks or so. Please enter some questions into the chat if you have them, or alternatively, you can unmute and ask a question verbally if you prefer. But I guess one question that I have for Chris and Jack is, I guess couple key takeaways. I think e-commerce obviously, but what did you find, I guess, most interesting in terms of the findings that came out of this work?
So I mean, so many things. The rapid growth in the number of packages over the past few years, the the rapid shift in who's delivering the packages over the past few years was fascinating as we were digging through the data. But then as we were going through the process of trying to develop the trip table, I think it was just really interesting, just how we were able to get some insights into where the packages are coming from that scan history data, and then of course being able to model that. I think one thing that will be useful going forward is, as e-commerce continues to change, as the role of different players in that space continue to change and change what they're doing, how we might be able to capture that going forward.
Jack, anything that jumped out to you?
Well, I mean, I hate to just say e-commerce again, but again, that's the most interesting part of this, and I feel like what everyone else is most interested in. And yeah, especially comparing since we had real data from 2018 and real data from 2023, that 250-ish% growth between the two. I mean, that's amazing, right? We all know it's increasing a lot in general, just from kind of our own usage of it. But the fact that it's more than tripling to me is nuts. And it's still got room to grow.
Okay. So we have a question from Kamal. Will the updated profiles allow you to look at this data at the municipal level? In the presentation, you can see it's at the county level.
So you can look at it to the NJTPA subregion level, which is all the counties in NJTPA, and then just the two municipalities of Newark and Jersey City. But there isn't discrete enough data to do it for every single town in New Jersey, in the NJTPA region.
So that's correct for the commodity flow data. We do have the e-commerce deliveries at the zip code level. And then of course, when we have things assigned to the travel demand model network, you can see kind of link level volumes as they pass through different portions of the subregions.
Okay. More questions. Excellent. Do you anticipate data on the type of fuel being used for these trips becoming available in the future?
I'm sorry, on the types of fuel. I think that's certainly a subject for further research. There's some some shift happening in terms of truck fuel types and electric charging. I think it remains to be seen how quickly and comprehensively those will be adopted by the trucking industry. And that certainly would have implications for how much petroleum fuel product is moved in the region. And that is one of the what if scenarios that we've developed in the freight forecasting tool, so that if there's a certain rate of change, or if there's kind of a target date for eliminating petroleum fuel products, that can be tested in the freight forecasting tool to see what happens to goods movement in those commodity groups.
Okay. I see Kamal unmuted. Did you have a question, Kamal? All right. It's not. All right. Another question in the chat box. Great presentation. What was the basis for your forecast of an additional 150% growth in package delivery? Presumably, this is not from FAF.
That's true. That's not from FAF. So the data that we got from Nielsen IQ was historic data. And we combined that with some of the trend in e-commerce as a percent of total retail sales in the United States. And that the Census Bureau tracks that. So what we did when trying to develop a forecast for e-commerce package deliveries was look at kind of what that trend in terms of retail market penetration that e-commerce has, and extending that into the future. But then also looking at some of the demographic drivers of e-commerce demand. So that includes population, household income, and so forth. So we were able to, increase the number of packages by looking at both that kind of retail market and demographic change through 2055.
Okay. Another question. Can we get the VMT and vehicle type from the data?
So these will be just trucks, so we won't have vehicle types beyond what's truck or not truck, from the RTME outputs. But yes, when you run a forecast scenario through the freight forecasting tool, and if you select the option to develop an RTME trip table, you could run that through the model and then estimate the truck VMTs associated with the scenario.
And we do separate, right? We have the FAF trucks, like the commodity trucks, and then we have the e-commerce delivery trucks. So
Right.
I guess in that respect, you do have a bit of a distinction between the vehicle types. But yeah, as Chris said, as far as like the truck types and anything else, it's basically a heavy truck. That's what you get from FAF. All right. Any questions from those on the phone, or those that prefer to ask questions verbally versus the chat box? Okay. Another one from Kamal, is having some issues with the audio. Can you print out parameters chosen from the dashboard to a PDF?
Hey,
or the
Red.
like? And I guess that the answer, Kamal, is yes, but you have to use kind of like a screen capture, like the Windows snipping tool or something like that, or just like a print screen. So it's not really like a true PDF, but yes, you can capture what you have, what you selected, and what the outputs show that way. And last call for questions. Seeing none. And I just again want to thank Jack and Chris for all the great work, and the rest of the consultant team that worked on this for the last year and a half. The products, the final report is undergoing final review as we speak, and hopefully in the next couple of weeks that will be posted online, as will be as will also be adding the new dashboards to the TPA website. So again, in the next couple of weeks is my hope that all of that will be available. And again, thank you to the consultants, thank you to the TAC for I think this project again accomplished some new things, and I think that the products kind of speak for themselves. I think they're very kind of comprehensive and present the information in a very kind of easy way to follow for the public, for the stakeholders, for everybody.